Alien scientists on Talaria Prime reeled in shock as human-made spacecraft tore the very fabric of space-time, panic seizing their core as sacred laws of physics shattered in the wake of the impossible machine. I remember the electric buzz humming through Earth that fateful year of 2075, as I stood in a NASA control center crowded with scientists. For months we had toiled and tinkered, checking and rechecking every equation and line of code, sweat and coffee, fueling our race towards the monumental achievement now blinking on the monitors. The SS Prometheus, Earth's very first FTL ship, streaking at unfathomable speeds towards Alpha Centauri. The control room erupted in tearful cheers and hugs, as we all felt both humbled and awed to witness this pivotal moment in human history. Yet while we celebrated, light years away, alien monitors closely tracked our ship, tense hands clasped in puzzlement. The Talarians, led by head researcher Ilara, gawked as the human-made vessel tore across the stars, spitting in the face of supposedly inviolable rules underpinning the cosmos itself. Ilara's heart raced, unable to reconcile the sheer impossibility splayed across her screens. As the Prometheus rocketed towards Alpha Centauri, she knew instantly that everything their kind thought they understood about the mechanics of the universe itself had just been shaken to the core. The aging human scientist telling the story, Dr. George Cook, explains that the Talarians, having long quietly probed us from afar, were now faced with an unavoidable dilemma. Keep to their stringent codes of non-involvement with primitive races like ours and risk losing grasp on the very forces governing reality itself, or break the silence of eons and make contact before the unfathomable power now clearly possessed by humanity threatened to rend the cosmos apart at the seams. Should they remain aloof and let the universe unravel around them as humans tread brazenly into the unknown, or take action and risk the unknown consequences of drawing our fledgling species into an infinitely larger galactic neighborhood we were clearly not prepared for? Dr. George Cook's wrinkled hands gripped his coffee mug, recalling the frantic reaction of the alien scientists in those pivotal moments. Ilara slammed her fists on the console, shouting orders to her team in the Talarian language. Half the researchers were glued to screens streaming telemetry from the Prometheus, while the other half ran simulations and crunched numbers, trying to unlock the secret to the ship's physics-defying travel. He took a long sip before continuing. You see, the Talarians prided themselves on their scientific prowess. In their eyes, no other civilization came close to their mastery of the cosmos's inner workings, so to see lowly humans, who they had written off as primitives, suddenly leapfrogging them, it shook their worldview to the core. Dr. Cook explained how Ilara paced the lab, her mind racing with the implications of humanity's breakthrough. If humans could harness FTL travel, how long before they unlocked other advances that threatened Talarian hegemony? She couldn't let her species' dominance slip away. Ilara and her team worked around the clock, barely stopping to eat or sleep. They dissected every scrap of sensor data, looking for some clue to the Prometheus propulsion. And then, after days of toil, they found it. An energy signature that matched no known force except one: dark energy. The aging scientist leaned forward. The Talarians had hypothesized about dark energy for centuries, but considered it too unstable to be utilized. Somehow, the humans had cracked the code. Ilara realized the immensity of the discovery. If her species could master dark energy as well, they could cement their superiority. But if the humans beat them to it, she shuddered at the thought. Dr. Cook took another swig of coffee, a mirthful glint in his eye as he recounted the momentous meeting. As the Prometheus made headlines across the galaxy, we soon had some rather unexpected visitors. A whole delegation of alien ambassadors showed up on our doorstep, eager to get the scoop on our little science project. He chuckled, shaking his head. I remember being escorted into this cavernous conference room, my palms sweaty and heart racing. I felt like a kid on the first day of school, surrounded by all these exotic, intimidating beings from far-flung corners of the universe. But at the same time, there was this incredible sense of pride, Like, look at what we've achieved to be sitting at the same table as these advanced races. Dr. Cook's expression grew thoughtful as he described the various ambassadors. There were the Zephyrians with their iridescent skin and melodic voices, who seemed genuinely excited by our breakthrough. They kept going on about the potential for collaboration and knowledge sharing. But then you had folks like Zorix from the Quantum Collective. He was a tall drink of water with these piercing, calculating eyes that made you feel like he was dissecting your every word. The scientist leaned forward, his voice lowering. As the talks went on, it became pretty clear that not everyone was thrilled about humanity's sudden leap forward. Zorax, in particular, kept grilling us about our intentions, our long-term plans. He'd ask these probing questions like, "Do you truly understand the magnitude of what you've unleashed? And how can you assure us that your species will wield this power responsibly?" Dr. Cook sighed, rubbing his temple. It was a delicate dance, trying to navigate all these competing agendas and concerns. Some of the ambassadors wanted to welcome us with open arms into the galactic community, while others seemed to view us as a potential threat that needed to be contained. I got the distinct impression that Zorax and his ilk were worried we might upset the existing balance of power. He sat back in his chair, his gaze distant. It was a lot to take in, realizing that our little species had suddenly become a player on the cosmic stage. We'd opened Pandora's box, and now we had to grapple with the consequences, both the incredible opportunities and the daunting responsibilities that came with our new status. Dr. Cook turned to face me directly, his expression grave. That meeting was just the beginning, though. As word of our FTL capabilities spread, it set off a chain reaction across the galaxy. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the action, whether as allies or adversaries, and let me tell you, navigating those choppy interstellar waters was no easy feat. But that's a whole other story. Dr. Cook leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he recounted the rising tension in the conference room. Zorax stood up, his eyes narrowing as he jabbed a long, bony finger towards Captain Hawkins. "You claim your intentions are peaceful," he hissed, "but how can we trust a species that has so rapidly gained such immense power? What's to stop you from turning your dark energy propulsion into a weapon of conquest?" The room fell silent, the weight of Zorax's accusation hanging heavy in the air. Captain Hawkins slowly rose to his feet, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the Quantum Collective ambassador's agitation. "I understand your concerns, Zorax," he began, his voice steady and measured. "But I assure you we humans have no desire for conquest or domination. Our only goal is to explore, to learn, to push the boundaries of what we thought possible." Hawkins paced the room, making eye contact with each of the alien representatives as he spoke. "Think about it. If we wanted to conquer, why would we be here, openly sharing our discovery with all of you? We could have kept the Prometheus technology a secret, used it to gain an advantage, but instead we invited you here to discuss and collaborate as equals." Despite Hawkins' impassioned speech, murmurs of discontent rippled through the gathered ambassadors. An insectoid delegate from the Zephyrian Empire stood, her iridescent wings fluttering in agitation. "Pretty words, Captain," she buzzed, "but actions speak louder. How do we know you won't change your tune once you realize the full potential of your new toy?" Voices rose in a cacophony of argument, accusation and counter-accusation flying across the table. Dr. Cook watched in growing dismay as the meeting descended into chaos, the fragile trust between the gathered species unraveling before his eyes. Just as it seemed the situation would devolve past the point of no return, Ilara's clear, commanding voice cut through the din. "Enough!" she shouted, slamming her hands down on the table. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the Talarian scientist. "Look at yourselves," Ilara said, her tone sharp with rebuke. "Squabbling like children, letting fear and suspicion cloud your judgment. Have you forgotten the core principles that bind the galactic community together?" She turned to face Zorax and the other skeptical ambassadors, her gaze unflinching. "The humans, like all sentient species, have the right to pursue knowledge and progress. It is not our place to hinder or control them, but to guide and support their development. Ilara's words hung in the air, a challenge and a plea all at once. I propose, she continued, that rather than viewing humanity's breakthrough as a threat, we see it as an opportunity for cooperation, for the exchange of ideas and technologies that could benefit all our civilizations. She looked around the room, making eye contact with each delegate in turn. But that can only happen if we approach this with open minds and hearts, if we choose to trust rather than fear. So I ask you, here and now, are we ready to take that leap? The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. Dr. Cook held his breath, wondering which way the scales would tip. Dr. Cook's eyes scanned the alien dignitaries, a mix of anticipation and relief washing over him as they slowly nodded in agreement to Ilara's proposal. The Talarian's impassioned plea had struck a chord, and the once hostile atmosphere began to thaw. Captain Hawkins stepped forward, his hand outstretched. On behalf of humanity, I accept this opportunity for collaboration. Together, we can unlock the potential of dark energy propulsion and usher in a new era of exploration and understanding. One by one, the ambassadors clasped Hawkins's hand, their reservations giving way to cautious optimism. Dr. Cook couldn't help but grin as he watched the historic moment unfold, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. In the days that followed, the newly formed task force convened on Earth, a diverse array of scientists and engineers from across the galaxy working side by side. Dr. Cook found himself immersed in a world of cutting-edge research, his mind racing with possibilities as he collaborated with brilliant minds like Ilara and Zorax's chief scientist, a brilliant but aloof figure named Xalax. But the euphoria was short-lived. Dr. Cook was hunched over his workstation, deep in thought as he analyzed the latest data from the Prometheus's dark energy core, when the lab doors burst open. Captain Hawkins strode in, his face drained of color. "Shall we have a problem?" Hawkins said, his voice tight with tension. "The Prometheus, it's been sabotaged." Dr. Cook felt his stomach drop, a cold sense of dread washing over him. He listened in stunned silence as Hawkins recounted the devastating discovery. The dark energy core had been deliberately damaged, its delicate components fused beyond repair. The news sent shockwaves through the task force, human and alien scientists alike reeling from the implications. Dr. Cook watched as accusations began to fly, suspicion falling heavily on Zorax and his cohorts. "It has to be them," Xalax insisted, his voice dripping with contempt. "They never wanted this alliance to succeed. They'll do anything to maintain their dominance." But Ilara shook her head, her brow furrowed in thought. "We can't jump to conclusions," she cautioned. "There's no evidence pointing to Zorax or anyone else. We need to investigate thoroughly before making any accusations." As the task force descended into chaos, Dr. Cook found himself drawn to Ilara's calm reasoning. The two scientists worked tirelessly to piece together the clues, poring over security footage and analyzing every scrap of data. But the more they dug, the more questions arose. The sabotage was clearly the work of a skilled hand, someone with intimate knowledge of the Prometheus's systems. Yet there were no signs of forced entry, no trace of the perpetrator. As days stretched into weeks with no breakthrough, tensions within the task force reached a boiling point. Dr. Cook watched helplessly as the fragile alliance began to unravel, old rivalries and suspicions bubbling to the surface. "We're running out of time," Ilara confided in him one late night in the lab, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "If we don't find some answers soon, this whole endeavor could fall apart." Dr. Cook nodded grimly, his own determination hardening. "Then we keep digging," he said, "for as long as it takes. There's too much at stake to give up now." Together, the two scientists redoubled their efforts, chasing down every lead and hunch. Dr. Cook's gut told him that the answer lay beyond the obvious suspects, that some unseen player was manipulating events from the shadows. But as the saboteur remained elusive and the task force's work ground to a standstill, Dr. Cook couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that gnawed at him. Whoever was behind this attack had struck at the very heart of the Alliance, and they wouldn't stop until the Prometheus secrets were buried forever. The aging scientist's hands trembled slightly as he recalled those fraught days, the weight of the galaxy's fate resting heavily on his shoulders. But even in the face of mounting odds, he and Elara refused to back down, determined to unravel the mystery before it was too late. Dr. Cook took a deep breath, his gaze distant as he lost himself in the memories. The true test he knew was yet to come. The saboteurs' next move would be the most dangerous of all, and the fate of the human-alien alliance hung by a thread. Dr. Cook's face grew somber as he recounted the fateful decision he and Elara made in the wake of the sabotage. Leaning forward, he spoke in a low, conspiratorial tone. Elara and I, we knew we were on our own. The task force was in shambles, accusations flying left and right. We couldn't trust anyone, not even our own governments, so we did the only thing we could. We launched our own secret investigation, off the books. The aging scientist's eyes took on a distant look as he recalled the covert operation. We chased down every lead, every scrap of evidence, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Late nights poring over data, clandestine meetings with informants. It was like something out of a spy thriller. He paused, taking a sip of his now lukewarm coffee. But our persistence paid off. We uncovered a trail, whispers of a secret Talarian base on the fringes of known space. It was a long shot, but we knew we had to take the risk. Dr. Cook's hand trembled slightly as he set down his mug, the memories of that perilous journey still vivid in his mind. We took a small unmarked ship, praying that we could slip past the watchful eyes of the Talarian authorities. As we approached the coordinates, my heart was in my throat. If we were caught, well, let's just say it wouldn't have been pretty. His voice dropped to a whisper as he described their arrival on the remote planet. The base was hidden deep in a mountainside, shielded from scanners. If we hadn't known exactly where to look, we never would have found it. But as we drew closer, we knew we were onto something big. Dr. Cook's face hardened as he recounted the moment they infiltrated the facility. Getting inside was no cakewalk. Elara had to hack through layers of security while I watched our backs. But once we were in, my God, what we found! He shook his head in disbelief, the shock still fresh even after all these years. It was a lab filled with tech I'd never seen before. Not just advanced, I'm talking light years beyond anything the Talarians had officially developed. And at the center of it all, the pièce de résistance, a fully intact replica of the Prometheus dark energy core. The scientist's eyes narrowed as he described the tense confrontation that followed. We didn't have long before the alarms started blaring. Elara and I, we knew we were cornered. That's when the lead scientist stepped out of the shadows. I recognized him from the task force. One of Elara's own people, a real high-up named Zathir. Dr. Cook's voice was laced with a mixture of anger and incredulity as he recounted Zathir's confession. The smug bastard, he laid it all out for us. How this rogue faction had been studying the Prometheus tech in secret, trying to unlock its secrets for their own gain. How they'd orchestrated the sabotage to keep the task force from discovering their little side project. He leaned back in his chair, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. But that wasn't even the half of it. No, the real kicker came when Zathir let slip who was backing their little operation. None other than Zorax himself, using his position to funnel them resources and intel, all while playing the part of the concerned diplomat. Dr. Cook slammed his fist on the table, the sudden outburst sending ripples through his forgotten coffee. It was all a setup, a goddamn sham. Zorax and his cronies, they'd been playing us all for fools, stoking tensions while they plotted to steal the Prometheus's secrets out from under us. He took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to compose himself. Elara and I, we knew we had to get this information back to Earth, to clear humanity's name before Zorax could make his move. But as we raced back to our ship, alarms blaring in our ears. Dr. Cook's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper as he recalled their desperate flight back to Earth. Elara's hands flew over the ship's controls, her eyes darting between the sensor readouts and the looming void ahead. The aging scientist gripped his seat, his heart pounding as the first volley of laser fire sliced past their hull. "Evasive maneuvers," Ilara barked, wrenching the ship into a stomach-churning dive. The unmarked vessels, sleek and predatory, swarmed around them like angry hornets, their weapons blazing in the darkness. Dr. Cook braced himself as the ship shuddered under the onslaught, sparks flying from overloaded consoles. Ilara's face was illuminated by the glow of the tactical display, her features set in a mask of grim determination as she wove through the enemy formation. "Rerouting power to the shields," she shouted over the din of battle. "George, man the rear turret." The scientist stumbled to the weapons console, his hands shaking as he gripped the controls. He'd never fired a shot in anger before, but as the first enemy fighter streaked into his crosshairs, instinct took over. The turret thrummed with power, spitting bolts of searing energy into the void. "Got one!" Dr. Cook whooped as the Talarian ship disintegrated in a blast of superheated plasma. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining vessels pressed their attack, forcing Ilara into a dizzying spiral of evasive maneuvers. The chase seemed to stretch for an eternity, the blackness of space lit by the strobe-like flashes of weapons fire. But finally, as Earth's familiar blue-green orbs swelled in the view screen, their pursuers fell back, unwilling to risk an incident in the heart of human space. Dr. Cook slumped back in his seat, his heart still racing as Ilara guided the battered ship into Earth's atmosphere. But their relief was short-lived. As they touched down at the spaceport, a phalanx of armed soldiers surrounded the craft, their weapons trained on the hatch. "George Cook and Ilara of Talaria," a voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "You are under arrest for treason and sabotage. Exit the vehicle with your hands up." The scientist's blood ran cold as he exchanged a stricken glance with Ilara. Zorax's influence ran deeper than they had ever imagined. Even here, on the soil of his own homeworld, the conspiracy had taken root. As the soldiers moved in, their boots ringing on the tarmac, Dr. Cook knew that their fight was far from over. They would have to rely on every ounce of cunning and every ally they could muster to clear their names and expose the truth. The aging scientist's voice was heavy with emotion as he described the months that followed, a tense and dangerous game of cat and mouse as he and Ilara worked to gather the evidence they needed. They moved from safe house to safe house, always one step ahead of Zorax's agents, relying on a network of trusted friends and colleagues to keep them hidden. "It was like living in a spy novel," Dr. Cook remarked, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Secret meetings in abandoned warehouses, dead drops in public parks. I never imagined that science would lead me into such a world of intrigue." But even as they pieced together the puzzle of the conspiracy, the scope of the betrayal only seemed to grow. Intercepted communications and leaked documents pointed to a web of corruption that extended to the highest echelons of galactic power, implicating officials from a dozen worlds in Zorax's schemes. Dr. Cook's fist clenched as he recalled the moment they finally cracked the encryption on a top-secret file, revealing the true depth of the rot. Names he had once respected, leaders he had admired, all complicit in a plot that threatened to plunge the galaxy into chaos. "It was a bitter pill to swallow," the scientist admitted, his voice thick with anger and disappointment, "to realize that so many we had trusted were willing to sacrifice the future for their own gain." But even in the face of such betrayal, Dr. Cook and Ilara refused to lose hope. They had the truth on their side, and with each new piece of evidence they uncovered, their resolve only grew stronger. The aging scientist leaned forward, his eyes blazing with the same determination that had carried him through those dark days. "We knew that we couldn't do it alone," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "That to take down a conspiracy this vast, we would need to rally the support of every honest soul in the galaxy." He paused, his gaze distant as he lost himself in the memories. "And so, with the evidence in hand and our allies at our side, we prepared to take the fight to Zorax and his minions, to expose their lies and machinations in the full light of day, and let the chips fall where they may." Dr. Cook's voice trailed off, the weight of those fateful days still heavy on his shoulders. But even in the face of the uncertain future that lay ahead, there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a conviction that, no matter the odds, the truth would ultimately prevail. Dr. Cook's voice grew urgent as he described the audacious plan he and Ilara had concocted, their last desperate gambit to expose the truth. Leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of determination and trepidation, he recounted the tense meetings with Captain Hawkins and his loyal crew. "We met in secret, in the depths of the Prometheus herself," Dr. Cook revealed, his hands clenching as he relived the memory. Hawkins and his team had been working around the clock, jury-rigging repairs to the damaged ship, knowing that she might be our only hope. The aging scientist described the heated debates that had raged in those clandestine gatherings as they weighed the risks and rewards of their daring scheme. Some argued that it was too dangerous, that we'd be walking straight into a trap, he admitted. But in the end, we all knew that there was no other choice. We had to confront Zorax and his cohorts head-on, in front of the entire galaxy. Dr. Cook's voice grew thick with emotion as he recounted the fateful day of the summit, the tension that had crackled through the Prometheus's corridors as Captain Hawkins and his crew prepared for their most audacious flight yet. "We knew that timing was everything," he explained, "that we had to make our entrance at just the right moment, when all eyes would be upon us." As the summit convened, the Prometheus hurtled through the void, her engines straining as she pushed towards her destination. Dr. Cook and Ilara paced the ship's decks, their nerves stretched to the breaking point, the weight of the evidence they carried lying heavy in their hands. "And then, we were there," Dr. Cook whispered, his eyes distant as he relived the moment. "Captain Hawkins brought us in low and fast, skimming over the heads of the gathered dignitaries. The sight of the Prometheus, the very ship they thought destroyed, sent a ripple of shock through the crowd." The aging scientist's voice rose as he described the chaos that had erupted as he and Ilara stormed into the summit chamber, their footsteps ringing on the polished floor. "We didn't waste a moment," he recounted, his words tumbling out in a rush. "We laid it all out. Every scrap of evidence, every damning recording and intercepted transmission. The proof of Zorax's treachery, the rot that had spread through the highest echelons of galactic power." Dr. Cook's fist slammed onto the table, rattling his forgotten coffee mug. "We demanded answers, demanded justice for the sabotage of the Prometheus and the betrayal of everything the galactic community stood for. And as the chamber descended into bedlam, accusations flying like poisoned darts, we stood our ground, knowing that the truth was finally out in the open." The aging scientist's voice grew quieter, a note of hope creeping into his words, as he described the intervention of the Arbiter, the mysterious figure who had stepped forward to call for order amidst the chaos. "The Arbiter's words carried weight," Dr. Cook explained, and as they echoed through the chamber, a hush fell over the assembled leaders. They pledged their support for a full investigation, promising that no stone would be left unturned in the pursuit of justice. As Dr. Cook's words trailed off, his gaze grew distant once more, the ghosts of those fateful moments still haunting his eyes. The revelation of the conspiracy had been a turning point, a moment when the future of the galaxy itself had hung in the balance. But even as the Arbiter's pledge of support rang in his ears, the aging scientist knew that the fight was far from over. The forces that had orchestrated the sabotage of the Prometheus were still out there, lurking in the shadows, and they would not rest until the truth had been buried once and for all. Dr. Cook's hands tightened on the arms of his chair, the weight of the task ahead settling heavily on his shoulders. He and Ilara had lit the spark, but now it fell to them to ensure that the flame of truth was not snuffed out, no matter the cost. The road ahead would be long and treacherous, but with the Prometheus at their side and the power of the truth on their side, they would not rest until justice had been served and the galaxy had been set right once. Dr. Cook's face darkened as he recalled the bitter struggle that followed the explosive summit. The Arbiter wasted no time assembling a crack team of investigators, each vetted for their incorruptibility and zeal for justice. But even as the task force delved into the sordid depths of the conspiracy, Zorax and his co-conspirators unleashed a relentless campaign of obstruction and sabotage. They wiped data cores, bribed witnesses, and disappeared key pieces of evidence, the aging scientist recounted, his voice heavy with frustration. Every time we thought we had a lead, it would slip through our fingers like smoke. But Dr. Cook and Ilara refused to be deterred. They worked tirelessly alongside the Arbiter's agents, poring over encrypted files and chasing down elusive informants in the galaxy's seediest corners. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to piece together the true scope of Zorax's machinations. "It was worse than we ever imagined," Dr. Cook revealed, his hands clenching into fists. Zorax hadn't just been trying to steal the Prometheus's technology. He'd been developing his own dark energy weapons, ones that could reshape the very fabric of the universe to his twisted designs. The task force redoubled their efforts, launching a series of daring raids on Zorax's secret laboratories and strongholds. Dr. Cook and Ilara found themselves on the front lines, their scientific expertise proving invaluable in the hunt for the rogue Quantum Collective leader. "We tracked him to a heavily fortified asteroid base on the fringes of Tellurian space," the scientist recounted, his eyes distant with the memory. "It was a veritable fortress, bristling with the most advanced weaponry blood money could buy." But the Allied forces were undeterred. With the full might of the Galactic Coalition at their back, they launched a blistering assault on the base, determined to bring Zorax to justice no matter the cost. Dr. Cook's voice grew hoarse as he described the brutal close-quarters fighting that followed as the task force battled their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the asteroid. Ilara and he fought side by side with the Allied soldiers, their knowledge of the base's layout gleaned from their earlier infiltration, proving crucial in the chaotic melee. "We finally cornered Zorax in his command center," Dr. Cook recounted, his breath coming in ragged gasps as if reliving the desperate struggle. He was surrounded by his most fanatical followers, each ready to lay down their lives for their twisted cause. In the end, it was Ilara who brought the tyrant down, her aim true as she sent a crackling bolt of energy straight through Zorax's black heart. As the Quantum Collective leader crumpled to the deck, his reign of terror at an end, Dr. Cook felt a surge of grim satisfaction, tempered by the weight of the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. "Zorax's death brought the conspiracy crashing down," the scientist explained, his voice heavy with exhaustion and grief. His lieutenants were quick to turn on each other, each scrambling to secure their own deal with the Arbiter. In the weeks that followed, the true depth of the rot was laid bare. Officials across a dozen worlds were implicated, their crimes ranging from simple graft to full-blown treason. The galaxy reeled at the revelations, struggling to come to terms with the fact that so many they had trusted had been working to subvert the very fabric of their society. But even as the guilty were brought to justice and their twisted works dismantled, Dr. Cook couldn't shake the bitter tang of the price they had paid. Too many brave souls had laid down their lives in the battle against Zorax, each loss a searing reminder of the fragility of the peace they had won. And yet, even in the depths of his grief, the aging scientist found solace in the knowledge that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The galaxy would heal as it always had, and the flame of hope and unity they had rekindled would light the way to a brighter tomorrow. Dr. Cook let out a shuddering breath, his eyes misty as he brought his tale to a close. "Zorax's schemes may have been thwarted," he said softly, "but the fight was far from over. New challenges loomed on the horizon, and humanity would have to prove itself anew on the galactic stage. But that," he added, a wry glint returning to his eye, "is a story for another time." Dr. Cook's voice grew reflective as he recounted the changes that swept through the galaxy in the wake of Zorax's downfall. The Allied races, humbled by the depths of the conspiracy's reach, vowed to usher in a new age of openness and cooperation. It was like a weight had been lifted, the aging scientist recalled, his eyes brightening at the memory. Suspicion gave way to collaboration, secrets to transparency. For the first time in eons, the galaxy felt truly united. As a testament to this new spirit, the joint scientific task force that had been instrumental in exposing the conspiracy was given a new lease on life. With Dr. Cook and Ilara at the helm, the team was charged with continuing the groundbreaking research into dark energy that had started it all. It was a humbling responsibility, Dr. Cook admitted, his voice tinged with a mix of excitement and trepidation. To be entrusted with a project of such magnitude, one that held the potential to reshape our understanding of the universe itself, it was both thrilling and daunting. The task force threw itself into the work with gusto, their ranks swelling with brilliant minds from every corner of the galaxy. United in purpose, they pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible, each breakthrough fueling the next in a dizzying spiral of discovery. But even as the team soared to new heights, tragedy struck without warning. Dr. Cook's voice faltered, his eyes glistening with unshed tears as he recounted the fateful experiment that claimed Ilara's life. "We were testing a new containment field," he explained, his words heavy with grief. "One moment everything was going according to plan, the next, chaos. The field collapsed, dark energy surging out of control. Ilara, she threw herself into the breach, using her own body to shield me from the blast." The aging scientist's shoulders sagged, the weight of his loss etched into every line of his face. In a heartbeat, she was gone. My closest friend, the brilliant mind that had been my guiding light through the darkest of times, snuffed out in an instant. The aftermath was a blur of grief and confusion, the task force reeling from the loss of their leader. But even in their darkest hour, Ilara's spirit endured, her sacrifice a poignant reminder of the values that had driven their work from the start. In the days that followed, as we struggled to pick up the pieces, I realized that the best way to honor Ilara's memory was to carry on her legacy, Dr. Cook explained, his voice regaining a measure of strength. To approach our research not as a quest for personal glory, but as a collaborative endeavor, one that held the potential to benefit all of galactic civilization. With renewed determination, the task force threw itself back into the breach, each member driven by a shared sense of purpose. And slowly but surely, the secrets of dark energy began to unravel, each new discovery a testament to the power of cooperation and shared knowledge. As Dr. Cook brought his tale to a close, his eyes shone with a mixture of emotions, pride in what they had accomplished, sorrow for those they had lost, and hope for the future that stretched out before them. "Ilara's legacy lives on in every breakthrough we make, every barrier we break down," he said softly, his gaze distant. "She taught us that the key to unlocking the universe's greatest mysteries lies not in hoarding knowledge, but in sharing it freely, in working together as one." The aging scientist's voice grew stronger, imbued with a quiet conviction. "And as we stand on the threshold of a new era of discovery, I know that her spirit will continue to guide us, to light the way forward as we forge ever deeper into the unknown." If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.